What causes inequality? Is it the greed of the 1%, or is it just that the poor are lazy? This question does not have one answer and is a touchy subject. However, by cutting through the finger pointing, we can arrive at a few basic conclusions. First off, who are the 1%? Well, this is all a matter of perspective. If you're referring to the top 1% of all income earners in the US, one would have to make about $380,000. However, to be part of the global 1%, one would have to make a net income of $34,000. To put this number in perspective, the average individual earner in the US makes about $40,000. Surprised? Chances are that if you were watching this video, you were already part of the 1%. Of course, telling people who are living on public housing and food stamps in the US that their conditions are far better than the average person in the world is probably not a good idea. So why does inequality exist? Inequality can mainly be attributed to a couple of key factors. Number 1. Where you were born. This is the sad and unfortunate truth. If you were born poor, you are probably going to stay poor. This is mainly because the poor often live paycheck to paycheck and don't have the ability to save money and accumulate wealth, and are often denied the same educational opportunities as members of the middle and upper classes. Number 2. Capitalism. If your labor is in high demand and is in short supply, you're going to be paid more. Likewise, if your labor is in low demand and in high supply, expect to be paid less. Number 3. Taxes. The more regressive a country's tax system is, the more skewed the income percentiles become. Service taxes especially take up a much higher percentage of, say, a cashier's salary than the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Number 4. Education. It's no secret that degree holders have a much higher salary than those who do not. The majority of the jobs available today require a bachelor's degree and above. Number 5. Globalization. As the world is becoming more closely interdependent, borders are becoming less relevant in the product and factor markets. The US is having to compete with other countries for market share of goods and services. This is putting a downward pressure on wages and is a reason for the disappearance of the type of blue-collar manufacturing jobs common in the 70s. Ironically, while globalization is increasing inequality in the US, it is decreasing it around the world. Number 6. Gender. Women on average make less than their male counterparts. The average female worker makes about 78% of what the average male worker makes. Much of this pay gap can be explained by differences in career choices and the fact that women tend to work less after they have children. Make no mistake, there is still a pay gap, but when controlling for differences in age, experience, and education, the gap in the salary of, say, a computer systems administrator is about 4%. Number 7. Ethnicity. This ties back into number 1, which was where you were born. People of ethnicities with lower socioeconomic status are paid less because they were born poor and thus didn't have the same opportunities as those higher up the social ladder. Furthermore, ethnic discrimination often limits the kinds of jobs that these people can seek, and thus find it harder to find a well-paying job than someone who doesn't have the same kind of ethnic baggage. An example of this would be a Hispanic job applicant in the US getting rejected for no other fault than his name. So now that we've gone over what causes inequality, we'll look at what can be done to try to mitigate it. Governments can reduce income inequality by placing a progressive tax system, and it can use the additional funds to boost public spending in infrastructure and education, as well as expand safety nets and transfer payments. Also, governments can increase the minimum wage, given that the increase is not too high, to reduce inequality. A moderate increase in the minimum wage would not affect unemployment and inflation by any discernible quantity, and would go a long way to boosting the purchasing power of the poorest among us. Finally, boosting the country's propensity to consume would decrease inequality by spreading the wealth that is concentrated amongst the very wealthy. The rich have a high propensity to save, which keeps wealth from circulating in the economy and limits the impact this wealth can do to increase economic growth. In contrast, if a higher percentage of this wealth were in the hands of the middle and working classes, the wealth would stay in circulation in the economy for a longer period of time because much more of it would be spent. In essence, saving and being frugal is bad for the economy, a concept which is known in Keynesian economics as the paradox of thrift. So, in conclusion, inequality isn't caused by the greed of the rich any more than that the poor are lazy. The simple truth is that the poor are far from lazy and work longer hours for less pay than the most privileged among us. And the rich aren't stealing from the hands of the poor and the middle class to make themselves richer. Well, that is if you're not Bernie Madoff.